Hello everybody, I'm Dan Murrell here with another edition of Charts with Dan. We have a lot to go over this weekend. Of course, the big story is the opening of Michael, which exceeded all expectations, and we'll talk about how those expectations are set, with a $97.2 million opening, and that's just here at the domestic box office. We're going to look at those numbers, the worldwide numbers, and the surprising group that helped the movie hit its box office milestone. So let's jump right into the box office top 10 for this past weekend. As I mentioned, Michael, the number one movie, with $97.2 million, easily the number one film, and we have a lot more to talk about there. The Super Mario Galaxy movie dropping 44% in its fourth week to bring in another $20.5 million. It's at $385.8 million domestic. Project Hail Mary continuing to hold well in its sixth week. It dropped 37% to bring in $12.8 million. It's now over the $300 million domestic mark. Lee Cronin's The Mummy dropping about like you'd expect a horror movie. Actually not as bad as some of them. 59% in week number 2 for $5.5 million. The drama hangs around the top 5 for another week. It dropped less than 50%. It's holding very well at $2.6 million. It's at $44.8 million domestic. Hopper's staying in 6th place in its 8th week in the top 10 with a 37% drop and another $1.9 million. You, Me, and Tuscany dropping 62%. It lost a lot of theaters this past weekend. It brought in $1.4 million. Over Your Dead Body opens in 8th place at $1.39 million. Then we have the latest horror film from A24. Was not quite able to capture the zeitgeist in the way that other A24 films have. It expanded into much wider release to bring in $1.2 million. And in 10th place was the documentary American Youngboy, which played at AMC theaters. I've got to be honest, I did not know about NBA Youngboy and his tour and his story, and I did a little bit of research as I was getting ready for this show. Listen, I'm an old. There's many things that I don't know. What a wild journey that was, but I would imagine there'd be a lot of interest to hear what exactly that story was. So that documentary rounds out the top 10. Dropping out of the top 10, we had 4 films, all out after just 1 week. Normal, the Bob Odenkirk action movie, out after 1 week, along with the BTS World Tour Japan live viewing, which was, of course, a one-night-only event. That's no surprise. The David Spade, Theo Von film Bus Boys, out after 1 week, and the Indian film Booth Bangla, also out after 1 week. And when we look at this weekend's box office versus the same weekend last year, I said on last week's show that it would be tough to compete because Sinners had such a great week 2 hold. There were other movies, multiple movies over $20 million. But Michael's overperformance or performance, whatever you want to call it, was able to not only keep us even, but have us slightly up over the same weekend last year. We were up 2.8%, which reverses a trend for the last few weeks of April weekends being lower in 2026 than they were in 2025. That's not a testament to the weakness of 2026's box office, by the way. That's a testament to the strength of 2025's. And on next week's show, once we have the data for the entire month, we'll look at how April of this year compared to last year and where we are with the box office year to date. A lot of people on this graphic have said they want me to have a year to date running total every single week. I think that would be very granular. I like doing it at the end of every month because we can see the big jumps. Did we drop over the entire month? Did we increase over the entire month? If we were tracking it week to week, I actually think the trend would get a little bit more muddy. So that's why I only do it at the end of the month. I understand people want to see it week to week, but I think monthly is really the best way to look at that. So let's look at Michael's box office performance, and we will start with the top domestic opening weekends of the year. We'll look at worldwide box office a little bit later in the show. Michael had the second best opening for any film domestically this year at $97.2 million, behind only the Super Mario Galaxy movie. It comes in about $17 million ahead of Project Hail Mary, which opened to $80 million. Then we have Scream 7 and Hoppers, Wuthering Heights, Goat, Send Help, Iron Lung, and Reminders of Him, rounding out the top 10. As far as overall weekends at the box office this year, Michael also had the second best weekend of 2026. So the top 3 of the opening weekends of Super Mario Galaxy, Michael, and Hail Mary. Then we have the second weekend of Super Mario Galaxy, followed by the opening of Scream 7, the second weekend of Project Hail Mary, the opening of Hoppers, the third weekend of Avatar Fire and Ash, which was the first box office weekend of the year, then the third weekend of the Super Mario Galaxy movie, and Wuthering Heights' opening weekend rounding out the top 10. The second weekend of Michael will absolutely be on this chart on next week's show. It's just a question of where it will fall. My guess is going to be somewhere in that 6, 7, 8 range. Michael also put up the 9th best opening weekend ever in the month of April, coming in just ahead of Captain America the Winter Soldier back in 2014. These numbers are unadjusted for inflation, by the way, and coming in just behind The Fate of the Furious back in 2017. And for Lionsgate, which is the studio behind Michael, it was their 6th best opening weekend ever. The top 5 are 4 Hunger Games films and 1 Twilight film. Now, you might be asking yourself, why is there only 1 Twilight film on Lionsgate's all-time opening weekends? That's because Lionsgate acquired Summit, who was releasing the Twilight films, shortly before the release of Breaking Dawn Part 2. So only that last film technically came under the Lionsgate banner. That's why you don't see the other films. So 4 Hunger Games movies, a Twilight movie, Michael coming in at 6. Then we have John Wick Chapter 4 and John Wick Chapter 3. The Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes at number 9. And Medea Goes to Jail at number 10. The one thing I learned putting this graphic together is that Lionsgate likes to release popular films with very long titles. Michael, by far the shortest title of any of these movies, and another Hunger Games film more than likely is going to join this top 10 by the end of the year. We looked at this graphic last week. These are the top openings for music biopics, and Michael absolutely demolished the record. The previous record was held by Straight Outta Compton back in the summer of 2015. Michael beat that record by about $37.2 million. It came in about $46 million ahead of where Bohemian Rhapsody opened in 2018, Elvis at number 4, and Bob Marley One Love rounding out the top 5. And even when you adjust for inflation, Michael still the number 1 music biopic opening by about $11 million. Straight Outta Compton adjusted up to about $86.9 million, followed by Bohemian Rhapsody at $67.9 million, Walk the Line at $39.6 million, and Elvis at $36.8 million. And on last week's show, I asked the members here on the channel, do you think Michael will break Straight Outta Compton's record for the highest musical biopic opening domestically, which that record used to be $60.2 million? 2/3 of you got it right. The prognostication streak continues. 64% of you said yes, Michael would break the record. Only 36% of you said no, it would not break the record. By the way, I collected this data early in the weekend before it became obvious that Michael was going to break that record because I wanted it to be unbiased data. So let's talk a little bit more about Michael's performance. The discussion, the discourse around this film has been interesting, to say the least. When I reviewed the movie last week here on the channel, a week ago, I said in that review, I think it's going to make a lot of money. I think people are really going to like it. And both of those things turned out to be true. And maybe predictably, a large part of the discourse once again became about audiences versus critics. There was even industry reporting talking about how the critics lost when it came to Michael. And I think the important thing to note here when it comes to critics, and I've said this many times before on the channel, is the discourse loves to create this competition between critics and audiences as if a box office performance either way is going to prove who is right. And I can tell you, at least from a critical standpoint, my standpoint, as well as the standpoint of almost every other critic that I know, it's not a competition. We're not out here trying to say, oh, we have the right opinion and you have the wrong opinion and we'll decide at the box office. That's not how it goes. Critics say what they think about a movie. Sometimes the audiences agree. Sometimes they disagree. The competition angle seems to be coming from audiences, in my opinion, much more than critics. If there's a critic that's framing it as a competition, I don't think they really have the intention of film criticism down particularly well. So that was really the tone and tenor of the conversation from the very beginning. And I was talking to some friends this weekend, and I said, you know, and I kind of knew this already going in, when it comes to Michael Jackson, I will put the Michael Jackson fandom up against any comic book franchise, up against any superhero, whatever you want to call it, as far as the loyalty and the veracity of the fans when it comes to defending Michael Jackson, when it comes to really making sure the critics know that they don't agree with what many of us thought of the movie. And I gave it a positive review, although it was marginally positive. I had some issues with the movie, with the pacing and with the depth of the film. But I knew that those were not things that were going to probably resonate with the audience at large. Most people wanted to show up to hear Michael Jackson's music and to celebrate that part of his career. And that's what they did, and people are having a great time. I don't mind that they're having a great time. I was pretty sure that's what was going to happen anyway. There were even members of the Jackson family who were kind of going after the critics. This was a tweet from Taj Jackson, who's one of Michael Jackson's nephews, who said that he can't wait till some critics have to eat crow. And again, It's not a thing of like the critics are waiting to hear what the audience says and saying like, oh my gosh, I was wrong. The audiences love it. Well, I guess I have to eat crow now. No, we're just sharing our opinion. Taj Jackson, by the way, like I said, one of Michael Jackson's nephews, I met him a few times years ago. Very nice person. I have no issue with Taj Jackson. He is obviously very much behind the movie, as the rest of Michael Jackson's family are, or most of them anyway. And so it's not surprising, although, again, I do wish that even the people inside the family weren't putting it up as this critics versus audiences thing and casting us as the villains in this story. I don't think that we are, but that's neither here nor there. The interesting thing when you talk about the discourse of the movie and even the narrative around the reporting of audiences liking it is that the reason that Michael did so well is that a lot of his fans, meaning his existing fans, the people that were his fans back in the 80s and 90s, were all going out to the movie to show their support for the Michael Jackson that they knew and loved from back then. And I'm sure that there was a lot of the audience that was in that group, but there was a lot of reporting around the demographics of the people that showed up to see Michael. And there was one in particular that really surprised me. So first of all, looking at the gender split, 61% women, 39% male. So a female-driven audience. When you look at race demographics, 38% black, 26% Latino and Hispanic, 24% white, Asian 6%, other 6%. So again, the audience largely non-white, largely driven by women. And that's where I'm not really surprised that tracking wasn't really accurate as far as the enthusiasm around this film. As we talked about on the show with other films in the past, tracking is horrific at predicting how a movie is going to do unless it has a predictable audience, unless it is the kind of audience like a Marvel film where based on the demographics of the other movies, you generally know how it's going to do that weekend. There's a reason that Black Panther was one of the only Marvel movies that tracking was way off on, and that's because they could not predict what audience was going to show up because they can really only predict predictable audiences. And for tracking, a predictable audience is largely a younger audience, mostly male, oftentimes a white audience. The models just aren't able to support enthusiasm among the quote unquote non-typical markets. And we can talk all day about why those are considered non-typical markets. This is yet another example of a movie in Hollywood where the analysts are shocked that it did so well only because it wasn't the usual teenage white guy audience for an MCU film. But the demographic that surprised me the most here was the age breakdown. 47%, and I believe that these demographics were taken through Saturday, of the audience was between 18 and 34 years old. 35 to 55-year-olds were 31% of the audience, 55 plus was 15% of the audience, and under 18 accounted for 7% of the audience. So almost half of the audience for Michael was 18 to 34 years old. And to put that into context, that means that the oldest audience members in that demographic were born in 1992, and they were 17 years old when Michael Jackson died. That's the oldest people in that demographic. You go younger from there because that's how numbers work. And that, I think, really goes to show what Michael Jackson's legacy is among the next generation. The people driving the ticket sales in the age demographic, the majority of them, or the biggest group of them, I should say, almost the majority of them, were the people for whom Michael Jackson is mostly a legacy, a memory. The people who have listened to his music in the past tense. And I think that that says a lot about what people remember or care about with Michael Jackson and what people remember or don't care about with Michael Jackson, because that younger audience obviously just wanted to go and enjoy the music and leave the discussion about everything else to the old people like me, and maybe to the people that were around or were older when all of the other stuff involving Michael Jackson happened. That's what really surprised me looking at these demographics. I wasn't shocked that it was majority female. I wasn't shocked that it was driven by a non-white audience, but I was very shocked that the young people made up almost 50% of the audience because they don't necessarily have that personal connection, meaning that real-time connection that a lot of other audience members did, and yet they turned up anyway. And if you're Lionsgate and if you're the Michael Jackson estate, you're probably happy about that because it shows you that there are a lot of young people that are very enthusiastic about him, maybe more enthusiastic than a lot of their older parents or brothers and sisters or aunts and uncles or grandparents at this point. And we will see next weekend which side of the seesaw it falls on. A lot of times, movies that are driven by a younger audience tend to fall harder in the second weekend because younger audience goers are more likely to go out on that first weekend. But oftentimes, movies that are driven by a female audience, that are driven by a non-white audience, tend to hold better on weekend number 2. So it'll be interesting to see which way we fall. Of course, we'll report on that here on the channel. Let's turn now to some of the other movies in the top 10, and we'll start with Super Mario Galaxy. I've been tracking this for the last couple weeks. These are the daily cumulative box office totals for the Super Mario Galaxy movie versus a Minecraft movie and the Super Mario Brothers movie. And what we're seeing is an escalation of really the last couple weeks of data, which is that the Super Mario Brothers movie is breaking away heavily from Super Mario Galaxy. It's obvious that the novelty of that film, perhaps the quality of that film, was much more appealing to audiences over time. And we're really seeing the Super Mario Galaxy movie now grappling with a Minecraft movie. That's where we're looking at as far as the domestic total, far less than the Super Mario Brothers movie and far closer to a Minecraft movie. Now remember, the 2 Super Mario movies released on Wednesday versus a Minecraft movie which released on Friday. So the daily totals may not tell the entire story. This is how all 3 films stack up through 4 weekends of release, and it's pretty much the same thing. A Minecraft movie is slowly closing that gap, and it wouldn't shock me if by the end of the run, it ends up actually a little bit higher domestically than the Super Mario Galaxy movie, and we're going to look at it as far as worldwide numbers in just a couple minutes. Project Hail Mary is also gaining on Oppenheimer. It's now $25 million behind Oppenheimer as far as highest grossing non-sequels of the 2020s. It's at $305 million. Oppenheimer ended up at $330 million. Michael, by the way, will be on this list because the closest movie you could say that the quote-unquote character of Michael Jackson appeared in a main role is Michael Jackson Moonwalker, which was not a theatrical release here in the United States. So Michael will eventually be on this list. And these are the daily cumulative totals for Project Hail Mary and Oppenheimer. And you can see that Oppenheimer has held a slim lead up until about the last week or so. And now Project Hail Mary is starting to pull ahead. So when we look at final domestic numbers for Project Hail Mary, I think it's very likely it's going to be slightly above Oppenheimer, maybe in that 340 to 345 range. So a huge hit for Amazon, Ryan Gosling, etc. And it really has weathered the competition from Super Mario and Michael. And we'll see how it does with The Devil Wears Prada 2, which opens this weekend. I also wanted to note that the drama has now passed my beloved Hereditary to become the 7th highest grossing film domestically in A24 history. It's now less than $4 million behind Talk to Me, a little bit more than $4 million behind Lady Bird. I think it's got a pretty good shot at maybe hitting that $50 million mark, which would put it right up there with Uncut Gems. So we should see this movie ending up at probably number 4, number 5 on the all-time domestic list for A24. It also broke a huge worldwide barrier, which we're going to talk about. But before we do that, this week marks the official beginning of the summer movie season. Even if you want to say that it's not technically summer, which you're correct, but Hollywood marks the beginning of the summer movie season on the first weekend in May. And as I mentioned, The Devil Wears Prada 2 opens this upcoming weekend. It's been 20 years since the first film, believe it or not. So this week's Charts with Dan trivia question is about the opening of the first Devil Wears Prada back in 2006. It opened nearly 20 years ago, and it was behind at the box office the debut of a superhero movie, which was number 1, and it was ahead of an Adam Sandler film, a Pixar film, and a Jack Black film. I think these questions have been a little bit easy lately, so I decided to give you a harder one. What I want to know is, what were the other 4 movies in the top 5 with the first Devil Wears Prada? Again, it was the debut of a superhero movie at number 1, as well as an Adam Sandler film, a Pixar film, and a Jack Black movie. I'll give you a minute to think about it. If you want to pause, I'll never know, and I wouldn't blame you for it. But the answer's coming if you're ready for it. And those movies were Superman Returns, which was the number 1 movie that weekend. The Devil Wears Prada was number 2. Then we had the extended runs of Click at number 3, Cars at number 4, and Nacho Libre at number 5. And for some reason, for me, with these long delayed sequels or huge spans between movies, it really puts into context just how long ago it was since the first movie. I mean, Superman has been rebooted twice since the first Devil Wears Prada came out. But we are getting ready for that second film, and I will have a review of that movie on the channel on Friday morning because they are not screening it anywhere in my region. So I'm going to go see it on Thursday night, and I'm looking forward to it because I actually liked the first movie. That also brings us to this week's Charts with Dan member poll question. We're kicking off the summer movie season. On last week's show, I shared my picks for the top 10 movies of the summer. What I want to know from the members here on the channel is, what do you think will be the number one movie of the summer? The highest domestic grosser, not worldwide, the highest domestic grosser because of release schedules, etc. That's just the cleanest way when I'm defining summer as the first weekend of May until Labor Day. Maybe you'll agree with me. I said it was going to be Toy Story 5. Maybe you'll disagree with me. Put down in the comments of that member poll what you think the number one movie of the summer will be. If you see your answer there already, upvote it instead of leaving it again, because it just makes it easier for me to tabulate the results. And I will share those results on next week's Charts with Dan. Let's turn now from the domestic box office to the worldwide box office. And of course, like here in the United States and in Canada, the box office around the world was dominated by Michael. It opened to $121.6 million. That was actually moved up a little bit yesterday from the original estimate on Sunday. The same thing happened with the domestic number. So that's a huge number internationally for Michael. He was a global superstar, so it's not a huge surprise. The Super Mario Galaxy movie brought in $36.6 million. It dropped 24%. That's largely due to openings in Japan, which helped to cushion that drop, although it looks like, much like we're seeing here and around the world, there is a substantial drop-off from the first movie to the second movie. Lee Cronin's The Mummy brought in $12.4 million, which was just ahead of Project Hail Mary at $12.2 million. And Detective Conan, Fallen Angel of the Highway, comes in fifth place at $7.1 million, maybe taking a little chunk out of Mario's box office over in Japan. When you take those international numbers, you combine them with our domestic numbers, we get the top 5 films worldwide. And Michael debuted to a final number of $218.8 million. So a phenomenal opening. I believe that was also the highest opening ever for a music biopic globally, topping Bohemian Rhapsody. The Super Mario Galaxy movie brought in another $57.2 million, bringing its total up to $831.4 million. And for a movie that everybody just about had in ink as a $1 billion movie, I think it's a little bit more questionable at this point. Not that $975 million or something like that would make it a flop, but for it to fall out of the $1 billion club when pretty much everybody had assumed it would be in, I think that probably sends a message to Nintendo and to Illumination that they may need to put a little bit more effort into that third Mario movie. They can't just assume that the same numbers are going to show up every single time. Project Hail Mary brought in another $25 million globally. It's now over the $600 million worldwide mark. Lee Cronin's The Mummy added $17.9 million, and The Drama brought in $8.3 million. That puts it over the $100 million worldwide mark. And when we look at A24's highest grossing releases, The Drama now becomes the 5th film ever in the history of A24 to break that $100 million mark. It's just behind Materialists, also behind Civil War, Everything Everywhere All at Once, and Marty Supreme, which is the number 1 highest grossing A24 release worldwide. Now, there are differing numbers between Box Office Mojo and ComScore as far as the actual total of The Drama. I believe Box Office Mojo has it a little bit lower. When there are conflicting sources, I just have to kind of make a judgment call. And the tiebreaker usually goes to ComScore because that is the direct reporting venue for ticket sales and all of that stuff. But it all works out eventually. Even if there's a discrepancy week to week, eventually we know what the final number is. These are the best opening weekends worldwide in 2026, and much like we saw here in the domestic marketplace, Michael put up the second best worldwide opening of the year at $218.8 million, behind only the Super Mario Galaxy movie, which opened to $314.1 million. Michael comes in well ahead of Pegasus 3, which was a Chinese New Year film at $152.1 million, although that movie opened much earlier in the week. Project Hail Mary and Scream 7 round out the top 5. And when we look at overall weekends worldwide this year, Michael had the second best weekend for any movie in 2026, behind the opening weekend of Super Mario Galaxy. It comes in ahead of Avatar Fire and Ash, which made $171 million on the first weekend of the year, January 2nd through the 4th. Then we have the opening of Pegasus 3 and the opening of Project Hail Mary. Much like we saw domestically, the second weekend of Michael will fall somewhere on this chart. It's just a question of where. And I mean, I could see it easily coming in number 6, maybe even number 5, depending on how it holds in different international markets. Let's wrap up the domestic side of things by looking at some of these specialty charts. First of all, these were the biggest theater count changes for the past weekend. I moved this down a little bit in show order. Mother Mary actually had the biggest theater count change of any movie this past weekend, but it was adding theaters. It went into 1,098 additional theaters after a very small limited release opening weekend. So that brought it up to 1,103 total theaters. You, Me, and Tuscany, as I mentioned, lost a bunch of theaters, over 1,000 of them. It's still in 2,115. The Drama lost 647 theaters. It's still in 1,982. The Super Mario Galaxy movie lost a fairly sizable chunk of theaters, 552 of them. A lot of those are probably single screen theaters or premium theaters that moved Michael in because it was obviously going to be a big box office hit. Reminders of Him lost most of its remaining theaters. It lost 505 theaters. It's still in 281, and I imagine we'll see some more big numbers dropping this upcoming weekend because The Devil Wears Prada 2 is similarly looking to have a big opening weekend, and I'm sure a lot of theaters are going to have to keep Michael and also make room for Murrell. These are the top per theater averages for the past weekend. At number one was Michael, which brought in an average of $24,578 per theater in each of its nearly 4,000 theaters. So some very busy theater managers and employees this past weekend. At number two is Omaha, which opened in one theater and brought in $13,590 in that theater. That film was a 2025 Sundance movie. A lot of people thought it might actually win the grand jury prize, but it did not, and it took over a year for it to finally get into very limited release. Indie cinema is not for the faint of heart. Blue Heron expanded into 7 theaters and made $6,440 per theater in those 7 theaters. I've heard some very, very good things about this film. I have no hope that it's ever going to play anywhere near me, but I am going to put it on my radar to check out when I can. The documentary Everyone is Lying to You for Money from Ben McKenzie expanded to 4 theaters and brought in $5,856 per theater. And the Super Mario Galaxy movie rounds out the top 5, still able to bring in $5,515 per theater in each of its over 3,700 theaters. Looking at the top films in limited release, at number one was American Young Boy in 583 theaters. It brought in $1.19 million. I Swear comes in second place. I so wish that this was playing near me. It did play in 645 theaters for a total of nearly $700,000. The Christophers went into 295 theaters and brought in just over $300,000. Exit 8 continues a successful limited theatrical run. It brought in $252,000. And the 4K re-release of Fight Club, playing in 700 theaters, brought in $228,000. This is what the 2026 domestic box office looks like as far as all movies released this year. The Super Mario Galaxy movies at number 1, followed by Project Hail Mary, Hoppers, Scream 7, and GOAT. Michael enters the chart at number 6 after just 3 days, and it will be moving up this chart with a quickness. It will almost certainly be number 3 by next weekend. Wuthering Heights, Send Help, and Reminders of Him all move down 1 spot. The Drama sticks at number 10, and Iron Lung, because the Drama moved past it over the past week, drops out of the 2026 top 10. But kudos to Markiplier for having a movie in the top 10 for 2026 for over 3 months. That is very impressive. This is what the box office looks like when you consider all tickets sold since January 1st. We're getting closer and closer to this matching just the 2026 domestic box office. Super Mario Galaxy, Project Hail Mary, and Hoppers are still 1, 2, and 3. Avatar Fire and Ash is at number 4. It sold $153.9 million worth of tickets this year, followed by Scream 7 and GOAT. Michael enters the chart at number 7. Zootopia 2 moves down to number 8. Wuthering Heights down to number 9. And The Housemaid to number 10. So those 2025 titles are slowly getting pushed out of the top 10. Avatar Fire and Ash will be there for a while. But this is really just becoming mostly 2026 movies, which is what happens as the year goes on. And this is what the worldwide box office looks like for 2026. The Super Mario Galaxy movie, the number 1 movie so far, at $831.4 million. Then we have Pegasus 3 at number 2, Project Hail Mary at number 3, Hoppers with $370 million at number 4, followed by Wuthering Heights, which is currently number 5, but it will soon be passed by Michael, which debuts also on this chart at number 6 at $218.8 million. Scream 7, Blades of the Guardians, Scare Out, and GOAT all move down 1 spot on this list, and Durandar the Revenge drops out of the 2026 worldwide top 10. So those are all the box office numbers I have for you this week. Before we go, though, I want to share with you the latest data I have in the world of streaming. And we'll start with the latest numbers from Netflix. New ones will be out later today. This covers the week of April 13th to April 19th. And the most watched program on Netflix was Thrash, which put up an impressive 34.53 million views in its second week on the streaming service and its first full week. 180, which is a Netflix original movie, came in second place, a distant second, with 9.47 million views. 180 is a South African movie about a father seeking revenge. Roommates comes in third place. This is an R-rated college comedy starring Sadie Sandler, who is the daughter of Adam Sandler. Trust Me, The False Prophet comes in fourth place at 6.91 million views. Bandy Season 1 is in fifth place at 5.19 million views. This is a French series about siblings struggling with a life of crime after being orphaned. At number 6 is the Netflix series Salish and Jordan Matter Season 1, which is a spinoff of their popular YouTube channel. Ronaldinho, the One and Only, a Brazilian documentary about the legendary Brazilian footballer, comes in at number 7 at 4.67 million views. Then we have Sisu debuting on Netflix at number 8 at 4.55 million views. Look What's Back, K-Pop Demon Hunters, 4.44 million views, is back in the top 10. It puts up enough views on a weekly basis that when there's a slower week on Netflix, we're going to probably still see it pop back in and out from time to time. And at number 10 is Toaster at 4.38 million views, which is a film from India about a guy in a toaster. I mean, that's all right there in the title. Looking at the most watched programs on Netflix in 2026, Thrash moves up to number 6 with 72.21 million views after about 10 days, and we'll see if it moves up when those latest numbers are released later today. That moves People We Meet on Vacation down to number 7, followed by Peaky Blinders, The Immortal Man, and One Piece Season 2. Durandar still at number 10. The most watched program on Netflix, still War Machine at 125.22 million views, followed by The Rip, Bridgerton Season 4, His and Hers, and K-Pop Demon Hunters, still in the top 5 at 86.14 million views just this year. Let's turn now to the latest numbers from Nielsen. Now, unlike the Netflix numbers we just looked at, these are domestic numbers, not global numbers, and they're delayed by about a month because that's how Nielsen runs their ship. So this is for the week of March 23rd to the 29th, and we'll look first at the most watched streaming movies. Anaconda, the 2025 version, lands at number 1 with its debut on Netflix with 12.16 million hours watched. Zootopia 2 comes in second place, followed by The Bad Guys 2. Minions, The Rise of Gru, returning to the top 5 at just over 7 million hours watched. Mercy, which came out in theaters earlier this year, lands at number 5 on Amazon Prime Video with 6.5 million hours watched. The Creator, which is one of those movies that I seem to be one of the only people that loves, is at number 6 with just over 5 million hours watched on Netflix. I'm glad some people are watching it. I hope they liked it. Peaky Blinders, The Immortal Man's at number 7. War Machines at number 8. Wicked for Good is at number 9. And Sisu Road to Revenge debuts at number 10 with just over 3 million hours watched. It should be noted, this is delayed by about a month, which is about when we saw it fall off the charts on Netflix, that for the first time since last summer, K-Pop Demon Hunters, not one of the most watched streaming movies in the US, but if the trend continues as we have seen on Netflix over the last few weeks, it's very likely, or possible at least, that it will re-enter the top 10 at some point. These were the most watched streaming shows for March 23rd through 29th. At number 1 was Beauty in Black at 22.7 million hours watched. Almost there, though, in that number 2 spot was The Pit, almost the number 1 show, at just over 20 million hours watched as it began to approach the end of its current season. Virgin Rivers at number 3, followed by The Madison on Paramount Plus and Grey's Anatomy. Bluey's at number 6. Family Guy returns to the top 10 at number 7. The Big Bang Theory's at number 8. One Piece sticks around at number 9. And Paradise moves back into the top 10 on the week of its latest finale with 10.65 million hours watched. And these were the top 10 shows when you rate them by watch time per available episode. So you take the number of hours watched divided by the number of episodes you can watch. That's how you get this number. The Madison leads the way with 2.56 million hours of watch time per episode, followed by the Netflix series Something Very Bad Is Going to Happen with just over 1 million hours watched per episode. The Pit comes in third at 745,000 hours per episode, followed by Beauty in Black at number 4, One Piece at number 5, Paradise at number 6, Invincible at number 7, Bridgerton at number 8, Virgin River at number 9, and Peaky Blinders, with the movie hitting Netflix. A lot of people going back to watch the show, bringing in just over 200,000 hours per episode. And that's why I like to do this chart, because these aren't all necessarily top 10 shows, but it just goes to show you that on an episode per episode basis, a lot of them are still racking up some very impressive view time. And those are all the numbers and facts and figures I have for you today. Before we go, I wanted to take a look at some things that you might be interested in, both in theaters and at home over the next week. First of all, today on Tuesday, a few recent releases hitting digital. One of them is Hoppers, so you can purchase the film or get it via premium video on demand. Those are those higher priced 48-hour rentals. They Will Kill You, also available for purchase and rental today, as well as Forbidden Fruits. On Wednesday, The Silence of the Lambs will be back in theaters. It was actually in theaters, I think, yesterday or the day before. But the final night in theaters will be on Wednesday for the 35th anniversary. So if you want to see it on the big screen, check it out on Wednesday. Widow's Bay also premieres on Apple TV on Wednesday. I've heard some good things about this show. It's from creator Katie Dippold, starring Matthew Rhys as the mayor of a potentially cursed town. On Thursday, Man on Fire is getting a Netflix series starring Yahya Abdul-Mateen II in the role played by Denzel Washington in the Tony Scott film. And then on Friday, of course, the big release is The Devil Wears Prada 2, which will be in theaters everywhere. Look for my review here on the channel Friday morning. Animal Farm will also be hitting theaters this weekend. It's Andy Serkis's new take on the classic story from Angel Studios. Everything I've seen and everything I've read about this film indicates that it completely misses the point of the story. This might have to be a hate watch for me. I'm just too morbidly curious about what this film is. So who knows? Or maybe I just don't want to devote precious hours of my life to it. We'll see. Also hitting theaters this weekend, we have a new horror film from Neon called Hokum. Adam Scott plays an author who investigates a potentially haunted hotel while traveling to spread his parents' ashes. In many theaters around the country is a movie called Deep Water, which is not the Ben Affleck, Ana de Armas movie from years ago. It's the newest movie from Rennie Harlin. He's returning to make another shark movie after Deep Blue Sea. Deep Water is about a plane that goes down in the Pacific and the survivors having to fight off killer sharks, and it co-stars Aaron Eckhart and Ben Kingsley. In many theaters around the country, you can also see That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime, the movie, Tears of the Azure Sea. Good luck to me putting that on a chart if it makes the top 10 next week. This is the second movie offshoot of the anime series, which comes from the manga series. You can also check out RZA's One Spoon of Chocolate, which is directed by RZA and executive produced by Quentin Tarantino. It's an action movie starring Shameik Moore, RJ Cyler, Blair Underwood, and Paris Jackson, Michael Jackson's daughter. So Michael will be in theaters and his daughter will also be in RZA's film. If you want to check out a movie on Netflix this weekend, Michael B. Jordan's technically first movie since winning the Oscar is a movie called Swapped. He and Juno Temple play two woodland animals who switch bodies. It's from Nathan Grano, who co-directed Tangled, and it's from Skydance Animation, whose last film was 2024's Spellbound, which also debuted on Netflix. And finally, next Monday, May the 4th, Star Wars Day. This is not a Star Wars show, but it's also on Netflix. It's the Lord of the Flies miniseries. It aired on the BBC earlier this year, and it is from Jack Thorne, who is the creator and writer of Adolescence. I've heard good things, although it seems like audience reaction is a bit split. That's everything I have for you this week. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to me yell numbers as usual. Be sure to stay tuned right here on the channel. Tomorrow, I will have my weekly live show unless something pops up unexpectedly. You can check out that review of The Devil Wears Prada 2 later on this week on Friday morning. And as always, you never know what's going to pop up week to week. But more than thanking you for watching those videos, I want to thank you for watching this video. If you're not subscribed, be sure to hit that subscribe button, hit the bell, so you know when I upload a new video. And if you're not a member yet, check out the description below so you can vote in those polls and get early access to some of my videos, custom badges and emoji to use in the chat. I'll see you all very soon. Until next time, stay safe, and I'll see you then. Bye.